To pause just for a moment to recognize those folks who lost their lives in the incident. Thank you, and our thoughts and prayers are still with the families. As always, our agenda is taken in two parts, the consent and the general agenda. Items on the consent agenda are approved with one sweeping motion unless a member of the council or committee requests an item to be pulled for consideration. With that being said, members of the committee, are there any items that should be pulled for consideration?
C1 and C2, please, sir.
All right, we have C1 and C2. Is there a motion to approve the balance?
So moved.
Second.
It's been motioned and properly seconded. All in favor, please vote yes. Opposers, no, to approve the remaining consent agenda items. That is approved. Item C1, please.
Item C1, resolution modifying the awarded contract for implementation of the 911 platform. Higher Ground, Inc., doing business as HG Technologies, Inc., for $162,880.
Councilmember Mundy.
My only question on this is, was there a difference in the budget? Did we account for this in the budget with the correct figure the first time around? I know the resolution and the CARF didn't match.
Good afternoon.
Yes, there was just a mistake, a typo in the initial one approved in January, but the actual amount is not changing.
Hey, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Recognize Councilmember Mundy. For a motion.
Oh, so moved. So moved to approve C1, I'm sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please vote yes. Opposers, no. Item C1 is approved unanimously. Item C2, please.
Item C2, resolution approving the purchase of public safety cameras and installation services to Cal 24 Security, $900,000.
We have a few council members that requested this be pulled. We'll start with Councilmember Mundy.
Thank you. I did have a question. The kind of the per camera charge seemed to be drastically different from one location to another. So I wondered if we could get just a little bit of an explanation on that, and then I've got a follow-up to that as well.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairman Taylor, members of council, Tom Karuska, CIO and Director of the IT Department.
Good afternoon.
You're right, the costs do vary quite a bit. The cost to put a camera in any particular location is usually the cost of the camera or cameras, the electricity to get it run, power, and probably the most important is internet access. Are we doing it through direct fiber, through the city's network, through cellular, through wireless? And that has a lot to do with the variation of cost, is physical location and getting to it as far as the cameras.
That does explain it. Thank you.
And the cameras are very consistent price-wise themselves.
One of the unfunded locations is one of our parking decks. And I know we can't put these in place until we have the funds for them, but particularly in light of some of the assaults we've had around town recently, I would love for us to see costing out at least putting security lights in, maybe motion detected lights. I know when I go into a parking deck, if it's after sundown, it's dimly lit. I don't feel safe if I'm by myself. And I think there are some inexpensive ways before we get the cameras in place that we might be able to address that. That's not an IT issue. But I just wanted to ask if maybe public safety could come back, whoever the appropriate person, if it's, I don't think it's public safety, but if we could see that, is that Public Works, Jeff?
We'll take the lead on that.
Okay, thank you.
Are you talking about the Stewart parking lot?
Actually, I think it was the Church Street parking lot.
Well, yeah, I caught it. Yeah, that's for my staff park, and I agree. That's there's 2 cameras right now, and that's it for that whole parking deck, and it shoots over to this building wireless. And it's expensive to deal with because of all the cement, but I would love to do something.
Yeah, if we get some bright LED lights that as you walk past, they pop on, it would also be helpful just to get in your car after dark.
We'll work with PFM.
Thank you.
Councilman Larson.
Yes. Every time we bring cameras forward to this commission, I ask one question, and that is, what about Bethabra? And can somebody tell me how much we lost at Bethabra in theft last year?
I can't answer
If you recall, we had the whole warehouse was cleaned out, and we lost thousands of dollars worth of valuable yard equipment, maintenance equipment, and there's no reason to think that that's any safer now than it was when we had that loss. and yet I do not see Bethabra anywhere on the list, either unfunded or funded.
No, that is not on the list currently with Recreation, but I know my staff has worked with William Royce and his team, and we have been out there just doing the estimates. I don't have a number as far as what it would cost. We've been working with them as far as PCs as well.
I've got to see it on the list at some point. I can't keep approving cameras, and we know that there's a huge problem at Bethabra, and we haven't been able to solve it yet. Now, every
Okay,
time it comes forward and said we're studying it, we're studying it.
Okay, we'll certainly get some estimates and put it in front of council and look for funding.
I'd like to see that. That's the only way I can really approve this.
Okay?
Councilwoman Scipio.
Yes, I think my little follow-up to Mr. Larson's concern, my concern is I know a lot of recreation centers are on the list. I am concerned that we have not included all of our recreation centers because I think they are all at risk. And you may not know which ones are not there.
I believe all the rec centers will be covered.
Okay, and all of our parks where we know we've had thefts, but more importantly, just to make sure when they just don't stay in neighborhoods now, they're flowing around the city.
Yeah,
So it'd be great if we knew, if we have them all covered. I would feel better if we have cameras at all of our facilities.
I'm pretty sure the recreation centers are covered. Now, I've done out all the parks are, and I can certainly work with, we're working off a list from William Royston, which really started from the 2018 bonds projects. But I agree, Happy Hill Park is one where I literally sat there a few months ago and could see the rooftop of the item I'm going to talk about in item G2. So I'll talk to William about all of the parks.
Thank you.
Councilmember McIntosh.
I'm curious how the list is derived. These are basically requests from other departments that come to you.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. What you see in Appendix D really came from William Royston Recreation and his team. The others, Appendix A, just kind of evolved. That's where we have cameras. And Appendix B is what we did with the 600,000 y'all approved May of 22. Really just came from projects and requests from other departments such as Marshall Park. We didn't know about that a year ago, but it was added, so.
So IT doesn't select the sites?
No, we suggest certain technologies, but we don't select it. Like Fire Station 3 and 13 came about because of the new projects. But for example, I'd like to get cameras to all the fire stations, talk to Chief Mail about it. Again, there's no funding right now for that, but it really comes from really the city manager's office is what drives it.
These are not free, it costs money to do these. I would like to make sure that we have buy-in from staff about where we're putting these, whether they're going to be useful or not. If they're useful, great. But let's
Yeah.
not just blanket the city with.
I can assure you, my staff doesn't make any final decision on where to put them. We march and do it.
Additional thoughts and comments on C2? Councilwoman Burke.
For the record, I want to echo what has been said. I would like to see these cameras at all of our recreation centers and parks. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Mundy.
Motion to approve C2.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and properly seconded. All in favor, please vote yes. Opposers, no. C2 is approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item G1, please.
Item G1, information on the hospital-based violence intervention program.
Recognize Interim City Manager Tony.
Good afternoon, Chair Taylor and members of the committee and council. This item before you is in reference to our hospital-based violence interruption program. This was from a grant that we received from the state in the amount of $500,000 and kind of echoes our Cure Violence program that's in the community. And with us today, we have Dr. Yasmin Gay. You can come on up, Yasmin. She will actually do the presentation and review of where we are implementing the program. And Dr. Gay has done an amazing job getting us up and off the ground running. And they've seen a number of patients already. So she'll give you an overview of the program.
Good afternoon, members of the council. Thank you guys for having us today.
Good afternoon.
I am Dr. Yasmin Gay. I'm an assistant professor at, Atrium Health, Wake Forest Baptist, also Wake Forest University School of Medicine. I'm sorry, I'm short, so yeah. Wake Forest School of Medicine. I'm also the PI and director of the Hospital-Based Violence Intervention Initiative that we started at Atrium Health. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of where we are, who we are, where we are, and where we're looking to go. And so if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to let me know. Okay. Are we moving to the next? Okay. So the first thing is understanding the objective of the actual initiative. I'm a clinician by trade. I am a psychotherapist by trade. And so in doing so, I work in the Department of Surgery Trauma, where individuals with gunshot wounds, stabbings, things of that nature, they come into the trauma unit. I work along with Dr. Martin Avery and some other physicians working with these patients with firearm injuries and assaults. So this is how this all came about. As a therapist, we do screening and brief interventions, specifically looking at substance use, post-traumatic stress, acute stress, and things of that nature as it relates to their injuries. However, one of the things that we were starting to notice was that there were other psychosocial elements that was in connection to, so we started to see them come back, right? And so our objective was to develop a comprehensive plan of care that included trauma-informed care, not just in the hospital, but post-acute when they leave the hospital. So the objective is to provide a comprehensive, culturally relevant, trauma-informed care and support to victims of violence and their families while working in collaboration with the community efforts to address underlying risk factors for interpersonal violence. Am I clicking? Oh, that's better. So firstly, let me introduce the members of the team. First, you have myself. I am the PI again and the director. Then you have our medical lead. Dr. Avery is a trauma surgeon, but he also loves data. He works in a lot of community-oriented projects as it relates to spot shotters and things of that nature, but he also helps, compile more information of who we serve and where they're located and things of that nature to give us an idea of where to make these community-based connections. So also we have Dr. Elizabeth Schilling. She is our evaluator. She's also over the counseling initiative within the Department of Surgery Trauma, where we include students in that process in order to advance the training. We also have a trauma fellow, Dr. Mary Alice McCullough. She is also a surgeon, mostly ED, but she also works with the project. We also have our H-Field Council Coordinator, Ms. Chelsea Mitchell, who's here today, along with Cynthia Jones. They are the counselors on the team, and I'll explain a little bit about how that all interconnects. You also have the counselor navigator, the case navigator, which is Ms. Virginia Martinez. Virginia plays a real intricate role with the post-discharge services for our individuals. And then we're also seeking currently a second navigator to complete the team. So these are the goals for the program. The first is enhance the existing hospital-based inpatient and outpatient intervention services for those victims of violence, but also the family. One of the things that we look at is when an individual is injured, it not only impacts that individual, but it impacts the system, whether it's the family or the community at large. So the first thing is to reduce the length of hospital stay and readmissions. Research says that an individual who is violently injured will be returned with another violently injury within 5 years. And our goal is to try to interrupt that cycle. The second is to address the ongoing needs of the victim and the family. Again, it not only impacts that individual, but it also impacts everything around. The second goal is to establish and leverage partnerships within community-based programs, agency, and community-based leaders. We can't do this alone. We are in the hospital, and so we are very limited in what that looks like once the individual returns into their community. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is really enhance that collaboration with community partners. That's important. So the model, the cure violence model, efficacy said if it's linked with a hospital, the chances of that program succeeding is greater. So I spent some time with Dr. Butts while I was putting this together, and also while they was putting the cure violence model together. And we found that it's better to work in collaboration than try to work in silos. Because if we work in silos, they're going to be doing what they're doing, we're going to be doing what we're doing, and it may or may not overlap, but the chances of us losing the person is greater. So we also will serve as a core contributor for safety for healthy communities. That means we have to come outside the doors of the hospital and engage in the community, and we've done some of those things, as we'll talk about later on. So these next slides are slides that Dr. Avery wanted to make sure that I shared with you, and where we get our information from. And most of the information that we get in the hospital is from the trauma registry, right? And so we're able to identify when an individual comes into the hospital based on the trauma registry, you know, where they're located, where they live, who they are, the age, and things of that nature. And so although the trauma registry is great, it doesn't tell us all of the information that we need. And so working in collaboration with law enforcement, Dr. Avery has, again, started capturing information as it relates to shootings that happen all across the city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. So just to give you some basic data, this just gives you an overview from where we were from 2020 to 2022. And then on the next slide, I will share with you more up-to-date current data with specifics to adult and pediatrics. So as you can see, the numbers for GSWs, and GSWs includes gunshot wounds and stabbings. In 2020, we had 340 that came into the hospital and 105 stabbings. And in 2022, we had 321 gunshot wounds and then 109 stabbings. The 294 initially was what we captured at the beginning, but then we went back to look at our stats from the trauma registry. That was wrong. So as we saw an increase in 2022. And based on all that, from 2020 to 2021, you'll see 27105, which is the cure violence target area. We had 99 patients come from within that zip code alone. So we knew that that was a target area that we needed to pay closer attention to.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this data just for Atrium Health?
Just for us. Yes, ma'am.
It does not include Novant, which
No, ma'am.
make these numbers higher?
Yes, ma'am, you're correct. I'm pretty sure if we had Novant's data as well, the numbers would probably increase. Yes, ma'am. And so in terms of adults at Atrium, on the trauma floor, any individual who are 16 and above is considered an adult, right? 15 and less they go to the pediatric unit. And so when we first started this project, we were specifically looking at 16 and up because that's what we were looking at. But we also had colleagues that were working in pediatric, and since then we've started to collaborate a little bit more because, as you'll note from later on, you'll see that we're starting to get consults from 15 below. So at the end of June, we had 194 gunshot wounds and 29 stabbings. And for individuals just between 16 and 18, we had 24 gunshot wounds, 1 death, unfortunately, and 1 stabbing. And if you look at the zip code locations, if you look at 27105, that encompassed 31 individuals who were shot and 4 who were stabbed. Again, 27107 is also an area that we're looking into. But as we're starting to really look into this, it's spreading throughout. So more to be revealed. When we're looking at individuals 16 below, we're at 3 individuals who sustained a gunshot wound, which I really hate that I have to report anything, to be honest with you, but this is where we are, and this was as of January. So this number probably has increased. He couldn't get me the information in time to include in this slide, but this just is in January, but I know that it's increased because we've consulted on a few cases that were 16 below, unfortunately. And so that was just base data. And so when we're looking at the individuals and the families and the community as a whole, there is a significant impact as it relates to interpersonal violence. And so the first you see, the individuals could be violently re-injured. So that's something for us to think about. We're thinking also about the psychological and emotional trauma as it relates to not only that individual, but the families and the community. Insurance. Insurance, unfortunately, is a factor. Those individuals with insurance may or may not have the resources to continue to receive services for those psychological, emotional, traumatic elements as it relates to counseling and things of that nature. But if they're underinsured or don't have insurance, we know that those factors also are greater. And we're also looking at elements of employment, unstable shelter, food, lack of resources, and basic necessities. So what we're looking at is basically the social determinants of health here. For our program specifically, this is the inclusion and exclusion criteria. And so to be included into our program, we look for individuals and their families who are impacted by interpersonal violence. And those elements could look like gunshot wounds, stabbings, blunt assaults with or without objects. Here recently, we had someone who a car was used to assault an individual, and so we included them. Generally, our to be eligible for the program, they're between the ages of 15 to 45. The research says anywhere from 14 to 34 is the primary age. But as you'll see when we start to look at what we're starting to come across, we're starting to look at maybe navigating those things. But we also do consultations with our colleagues. You heard me mention earlier about pediatric injuries, and we're seeing more and more that we're being consulted, not just for the individual who's impacted, but also mostly we've been working with their families. And so we are open for consultation. We're not just going to stay, while it's best to stay within your inclusion criteria, those individuals are impacted by interpersonal violence, and we want to make sure that they are receiving some type of resources if we're able to do so. Exclusionary criteria includes sexual assault or rape. We have a team basically for these exclusion criteria that at the hospital that assists with those things. And because our program is specifically for individuals that are impacted by interpersonal violence, we wanted to make sure if we do come across individuals who are a victim of rape or domestic violence, trafficking, and things of that nature, that we do a warm handoff or referral to those specific services within Atrium Health and the community. So this is basically how we operate. And so the first thing we do is we identify those individuals who are impacted by interpersonal violence using the trauma registry. We screen every morning, so we're able to see what their injuries are, where they're located, and things of that nature. And then we establish ourselves. We go to see them at bedside. Once we meet them at bedside, rapport and trust is everything, especially for this population, because if they don't trust the process, they will kick you out the room. And so we try to go at bedside to build that rapport, establish those relationships, and just to share what our services provides. We do brief screening and intervention, crisis intervention, those type things at bedside. However, just depending on the injuries that they sustain, it might not be applicable. So we meet them where they are and get all the information that we can get while they're at bedside. And then, however, let me go back. At that time, if we are made aware that one of the first questions that we ask them when we're working with them is, do you feel that your injury may result in retaliation? That's huge because we need to put some people on alert that this may go beyond the hospital. Thankfully, we have not had situations where, there's anything that happened within the hospital setting, but we're prepared. However, we want to make sure that individual feels safe going back into their environment or whatever that looks like. Do we need to start to contact people to say, hey, could this person be relocated, or things of that nature. So that's one primal question that we ask in working with these individuals, because we need to know that. And in conversations with Ms. Robinson and Ms. Covington, we talked about ways to kind of give information to one another in order for them to activate Cure Violence. We're still in the probably the infant stages of making that collaboration in terms of how that looks in terms of an agreement for PHI and things of that nature. But as of now, that is something that we want to make sure that we are aware of and make sure that they're aware of, so they can be alerted and knowing how to move forward. Advocacy and person-centered navigation is really, really important with us. For us, there's not a one-size-fits-all model to each individual. And so while this may have worked for Jack, this may not work for John, right? And so we use a very individualized approach to each and every patient that we work with, in order to make sure that those case management services will meet their specific needs and that of their family. And then lastly, you'll see the collaboration with the community partners. And as you can see, we have Cure Violence, community-based programs that could be anywhere from Goodwill to, what are some others? Insight, Human Services, Daymark, whatever the needs of the clients are. In the middle, you'll note that we have an advisory board. We have decided to develop an advisory board combined of not just professionals within the community, but also individuals who are directly impacted by interpersonal violence. That could be mothers of individuals who lost their son. That could be the individual who was directly assaulted and things of that nature. But I think all voices need to be held, at the table in order to make informed decisions for the efficacy of this program. So let's show you where we are now. So we just really started seeing patients June of this year. We hired Ms. Chelsea Mitchell and Virginia. They were the first two, along with myself, and we hit the ground running. As soon as they said yes, I said, let's go. And so we started in Q4 with, you'll see for patient gender, males for Q4, we had 24 males, and then we had 4 females. Currently, we have 53 males and 8 females. So we went from 28 to now 61. Patient, as it relates to their race and ethnicity, Q4, we had 15 who identified as Black or African American, and currently we have 35. Individuals who identified as white, for Q4 we have 7, and currently we have 16. Individuals who identify as Indian or Alaskan Native, in Q4 we had 1, and we currently have 1. Other individuals who identified as other, in Q5 we have 5, and currently we have 9. And those individuals may identify as Hispanic, Latino, Spanish, Mexican, Mexican American, or Pacific Islander. And age is what I want to point your attention to, because that's kind of, what I was sharing with you guys early in terms of our eligibility criteria. So when we started, we initially said, okay, 14 to 45, right? We were consulted by one of our colleagues who work in pediatrics, and she said, hey, we have a 10-year-old. And I really, really would love for you guys to intervene and see this individual and their families. And we did. So we now have 1 patient who is 10 years old. Currently, we have between the ages of 15 to 17. In Q3, we had 3. And currently, we have 3. Our goal is to have 0. Between 18 and 25 for Q4, we had 8. Currently, we have 11. 26 to 33, same. We had 3 in Q4. Currently, we have 11. And as you can see, the numbers are increasing across the spectrum. But pay attention to 55 plus. That was our outlier, and I shared with Patrice. I said, this was something I wasn't expecting, because this is not what the research said, right? This is not, I wasn't expecting this. But what we are finding is individuals in that age range are just as active, because if you look at the data, they're in an alliance with those individuals between 13 and 45, and that's just here in Winston-Salem. It'll be interesting to see across North Carolina. but that's something that I thought was interesting. In terms of patient injuries, in Q4, we had 22 GSWs and 6 penetrating traumas. Currently, we have 41 GSWs and 20 penetrating traumas. The patient location was also something that we wanted to identify because we wanted to see, okay, we know our primary priority is Forsyth County. However, we're a level 1 trauma hospital. So we see individuals throughout. And for Forsyth County, we currently have 26 individuals. Guilford County, 5. Iredell, 4. Davidson is picked up from 3 to 7. And also out-of-state individuals we're starting to see. Now, the question might be, wait, the priority is Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and it is. However, for those individuals, we still want to provide them resources because what we're starting to also see is they may have been injured in Forsyth County and live other places, especially Iredell. That was, Davidson, that was an area that we were like, well, what happened here? Guilford, that's, kind of on, back and forth, but some of those outliers, especially like Wilkes County, that pops out of nowhere. We weren't like, what happened here? But many of the injuries may happen here in Forsyth County, but they live other places. In terms of training and community engagement, advocacy, and partnership, again, those are some tenets of this program. And so I wanted to kind of share with you what we've been doing a little bit. And so the first thing is we applied for consultation with the Health Alliance for Violence Intervention, known as HIVI. HIVI is almost like the accrediting body for hospital violence intervention programs. They put the stamp on it to let you know, okay, they're serious about the work that they're doing, and they will provide technical assistance and specialized training specifically for our program. And so they are due to start working with us in January of 2024, and I'm excited to say that because they don't take any and everyone. They want to make sure that you have some types of protocols in place. We also engaged in the recognition of Gun Violence Awareness Month that happened in June. So we kicked off, because we had just started the Wear Orange initiative within the hospital, because we wanted to let them know, hey, we're here, we're starting to see patients, we're up and running. We also participated in the Week of Healing that happened here in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, because we, again, coming outside of the hospital to make sure that the community knows that we're just engaged. We are part of that process. We're part of that community. And so it provided individuals within the community, especially some of the programs and agencies, the ability to know that this was actually happening because they had no idea that this was going on. So it was best educational for both of us. We also engage in research. As you can see, we try to use data to kind of drive our initiatives. And so not only that, we work along with, we went and engaged in what they call the think tank. There is a program within Atrium that's called Violence as a Health Disparity. And because of the work that we're doing, we thought that this would be a good initiative to kind of engage and to give them a voice that this is what's happening in the hospital. We also presented in the Cure Violence Forsyth Win community event held in Cleveland Avenue Homes. That was pretty fun. Again, wanted to make sure that we let our community partners know that we're just as engaged in the fight that they are. We also are engaged in ongoing meetings, conversations. Project Safe Neighborhoods is one that we, and the Cure Violence Committee is one that we definitely continue to work along with, just again to strengthen those and lever those partnerships. And again, the development of the advisory board. So overall, our goal is to provide, again, trauma-informed, hospital-based support services, community support, advocacy, funding, and as you can see, research is in the middle. This is our contact information. I know this was a lot that I threw at you guys, just in one setting. However, if you think of anything, please reach out to us if you have some suggestions, or you want to know more, or there's some things that you think that would be helpful for us. Let us know. We definitely will come out, or you can come visit us in the hospital to kind of see what our process is like. And that's our contact information. So just give us a shout out.
Dr. Gay, thank you for being here today. I'm sure that there are some questions and comments. Before we get to those, I do want to say thank you for being here and for presenting this information. We appreciate your partnership in the community, and we're just honored. It's hard to address a problem if you don't know it exists, but once you pinpoint it, you can address it and try to get it down to where we can make a difference. So with that being said, we're going to go ladies first. Well, Councilmember Scipio, we'll work our way around.
Thank you. This is just, seems like a very wonderful program. I have just two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The numbers you say you are showing when it says 4, 5, whatever number of participants, is that how many people have interacted with your program one time, or is it a continuous, ongoing connection?
That's a great question. So they interact with us in the hospital more than one time. It's not a one-time thing. And then post-discharge, they interact with Virginia. So it's a two-step process. In the hospital, they mostly engage with the counselors. Our contacts, what we've tried to do is make sure that they have at least 4 contacts a month, across the board, every patient. You have to think about these individuals are recovering from physical injuries, so we have to go slow sometimes. So whether the 2 or 3 contacts happen in the hospital and then we contact them post-discharge and they say, hey, give me 2 weeks, we continue. It's a continuous, once you're connected with us, you're connected with us unless you say, stop calling me. And then at that time, we will, terminate services and things of that nature. We hadn't had that happen as of yet. So it's a combination of both. So it doesn't start, it starts when we first contact them in the hospital, and that's where we make that connection. Yes, ma'am.
And then my second question is, how are you funded?
We're funded through you all, thank you. And we also, I wrote a grant, the VOCA grant, and received funding for that as well. And so it's through GCCC, and received VOCA funding as well to kind of match it because it's a lot to run this.
I do know that I'm an advocate for any federal fundings, and I know that the NIH has an Office of Minority Health that since so many of your constituents are minorities, it might be a great place to look for some ongoing funding.
Yes, ma'am, because I'm going to need it.
Thank you.
Write it down.
Thank you, Councilwoman Scipio. Councilman Mundy.
Thank you, and thanks to you for this presentation. Many years ago, I think it was about 30 years ago, I worked with the Crosby Scholars Program when we were first getting up and running, and substance abuse prevention is a big piece of that. Our research showed that the 5th grade is when a lot of young kids make that decision of whether or not to do drugs. I would guess that violence also might start at a young age, and I wonder why we're not, why your group is not trying to target that younger age before it's so ingrained in their culture.
I guess because for our end, we see it after the fact, right? So our program is more intervention versus prevention. We intervene once the assault has happened, right? And then we try to intervene, but also provide preventive measures along the way, which is why that family component is so important. We look at this as a systems model, right? And which is why I kept saying it not only impacts that individual, it impacts everybody around it. And so I think there's a strong correlation with substance use and violence. Yes, it is. But I would gather that if that environment is violently prone, that the decision is probably made earlier than 5th grade. And so for us, we see it after the fact. But for case in point, for the individual that's 10 years old, that healing is going to take some time. Right? Because they're trying to process what just happened. And their worldview has changed forever, not only as it relates to safety, but safety in the community. And so, that could be another component. I need some funding for it, but
Sure.
something to look at. But I'm also an addiction specialist as well, so I definitely understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Dr. Gay? Councilwoman Burke.
I just want to say thank you for this intervention program. And I know that you all are working hard. You have your hands full. And we're just happy to be able to support what you are doing to support our community in need. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It goes without saying how honored I am to be here to share this information with you. I'm excited about it. I'm excited that you guys took a risk to say, hey, this is worth investing in. So I applaud your efforts for making the city of Winston-Salem the safest place that it can be.
One
Thank
more
you.
thought before you go, Dr. Gay.
Okay.
Councilman Larson.
Thank you so much for this. This seems to be a very interesting and well-documented snapshot of a very specific population that comes in your door. And you know, what I'm curious about is how it interfaces with the police department records that we keep ourselves.
That's Dr. Avery. That is Dr. Avery. Dr. Avery has started to establish a relationship with Chief Penn and he does with Sheriff Kimbrough and also Chief Kid Tilley in Kernersville, because he wants to see what data they have and they want to see the data he has as it relates to where he's starting. Like, for example, I live in Kernersville and we're starting to see some things pop up in Kernersville that Chief Tilley had no idea. And so we are working in collaboration with them in that capacity with law enforcement.
You got to know what the problem is before you can address it, so you're clearly identifying.
Absolutely. And one of the elements of this project is also those individuals who are uninsured or underinsured. We do assist them with applying for victims' compensation. That process within itself, it includes the law enforcement piece, and they have been very helpful in helping us get the documentation that's needed, because it's not one of those you just go online and just hit submit. There's so much documentation that's needed, a police report, financial elements, you know, things of that nature. So they have been very helpful in helping us gain that information for these individuals.
One last question or observation is the exclusion categories that you had, including rape and child violence and human trafficking and some of the other things that are clearly violent crimes. You decided to exclude those, and can you just spend a moment and remind me how those are being handled elsewhere? Is that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have, in our hospital within itself, we have services available for those individuals. There's someone that's their lane, if you will. And so if we identify an individual, it's not to say that we can't work in collaboration with, but if this is as a result of a rape or an assault, we know that element in area is going to go in a different direction, and it'll probably need someone that specializes more in that area. We can still support them and provide assistance, but yeah, it's taken care of elsewhere within our hospital and within the community. So for example, we do have a connection within the Sheriff's Department for the individuals, victim services. So if they fall within that criteria, it's not that, oh, you know, you're not a victim of our type of violence, but we do, you know, provide them a resource.
So gunshot wounds and stabbing and blunt objects are an area that is sort of falling through the cracks as far as data development, treatments,
Yes.
programs. Well, thank you for doing that.
We're trying.
Thank you again, Dr. Gay. I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Avery, Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Jones, Ms. Martinez. Thank you all for being here, and we appreciate your partnership.
Thank you guys for having us.
you.
Take care.
Item G2, please.
Item G2, information regarding an agreement with the owners of True Liant Tower.
Mr. Koreshko.
Afternoon, Chairman Taylor, members of council, still Tom Kruska, CIO. Actually, I'm going to speak as an informational item, which kind of ties back to some of your questions earlier. So, as you know, we support 500-plus cameras, and there's many more, as you saw in item C2, I believe it was. A little background. So last year, I was working on a renewal of a 20-year contract for the lease of the formerly Winston Tower, now the True Liant Tower, for the city-county public radio system. We signed, the city signed a lease with the county back in 2002 with the owners of the building, and as you all know, that's the core hub of our city-county public radio system, and you know, upgrade going on right now as we speak. So last year I was working on that and working along with the prior owner on a new agreement, costs, et cetera, for 20 years, and then in August I got surprised and was told the building was being sold to a firm called JTM Capital Partners. The principal partner is a gentleman named Jason Tuttle out of the Charlotte area. We went on and signed an agreement. We brought it to council in December 22. Y'all approved it, and we're now locked in for 20 years. So earlier this year, I got talking to Mr. Tuttle about, can we put cameras on the rooftop? Because that's a great bird's eye view of some downtown real estate. And, he was very open to it. March, April timeframe, myself and some staff went up on the rooftop with him and kind of showing him our equipment and some of the visions. And as we got talking about the cameras, he could see what I wanted to do. And the technology is these 4 cameras are going to point the video to an antenna on the rooftop of True Lion, which will point them to an antenna in this rooftop. And then we'll run it down to our data center, ultimately over to WSPD, Real-Time Crime Center. So that's the technology. We're actually using the same wireless technology in Mercial Park, Corporation Plaza, Winston Square, and 4th Street. This technology really wasn't around a couple years ago. But what I asked Mr. Tuttle is, could we put some antennas facing all different directions to help get these remote sites, the parks we talked about, and the remote locations. And he supported that. I brought up the topic of costs, and he graciously said, we're not going to charge anything. He just wants a true public-private partnership. I do appreciate that, and I'd actually invited him to come today, but he had a conflict. He couldn't make it. So I want to share this with you that we're in the process of purchasing those 4 cameras, and you know that's big by itself, just that view of cameras in downtown. But to build this wireless mesh network, I think it was Councilor Monday asked me about the cost. And, you know, to put a camera or cameras in a location, you got to have the cameras, and you got to have power, and you got to have access to the internet. And for several years, we were pretty much tied, our hands were tied to the city's fiber network that we have in this building and other buildings. And we work with DOT on some of their fiber. The last couple of years, we've ventured into cellular services, the T-Mobiles of the world, but it's just the quality's not quite there for what WSPD needs. This technology that we have in the rooftop just opens up opportunities that are just, unlimited. Because now I could have cameras. We do have cameras today at the quarry at Grant Park. We have cameras for today. We're running through T-Mobile playing a monthly service. Well, once we get the antenna out there, we can point those cameras on the quarry up to this roof, the True Lion back to our rooftop. So as you can see, we have the opportunity to build a wireless mesh to expand, the fiber, backbone of getting these cameras online. There's other features that I didn't talk about in the memo because this is a public safety meeting and security cameras seem to be the main topic. But I do want to mention Wi-Fi, for example. We have cameras and Wi-Fi for the public commercial park. That Wi-Fi runs on the same technology that we're running those cameras on. So we could literally use this technology and expand public Wi-Fi to more remote areas using the same mesh network. It's a vision I have. It's something I want to go after. I'm sure Councilor McIntosh is parking spaces. There's been a talk in the past about where can I park. So if we had cameras up in the air pointing to parking decks or parking spaces around, say, the fairgrounds, and I'm a citizen coming in from Kernersville, Greensboro, wherever, I could be on my personal device, go to the city's website, hit a link, and I can see a real-time the video. Well, here's the parking lots, which ones are full and which ones aren't. So there's other applications we can leverage this for, and I really wish Mr. Tuttle could have been here because it's a great partnership, and this rooftop has just opened up a lot of opportunity for us. And I'll stop there and take any questions.
Well, Ms. Koreska, thank you for the presentation. I can say I've learned over the years that several things can be true at the same time. We used to think it was one or the other, but you can love and support and want to see downtown grow and be safe. But what I'm hearing, the general consensus of this council is we want to make sure we're doing the same thing because we feel equally as important in our individual areas that we represent. But as long as that's being done, I think, there's general consensus to move forward. But this is an informational item. Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Scipio.
I think this is absolutely the way we should go as a community because we want to be in the best technology that's out there. But with technology comes other concerns. So I know the tower, I'm sure the access to the roof is exceptionally secure. Is that right?
Oh, yes. I mean, it took me several phone calls just to meet the owner up there.
Okay.
Yes, it's very secure.
Yeah, 'cause at one time it was open to the public for viewing until the man jumped off.
Yeah, it was an observation deck at one time, but no more. It's very locked down.
So with this technology also, how hackable is it?
How hackable?
Everything can be hacked, I do believe.
You gotta be careful, that's very close to me in my heart, hackers. It's secure. I mean, it's no more hackable than your city fiber network. It's fairly secure. Everything's transmitted, encrypted, and it's secure. I'm not too worried about that. I'm probably more concerned with we get relying on it and a certain area goes out. A camera goes out or something, then PDs, all of a sudden they don't have a camera. But I feel pretty confident about the security of it, very confident.
Good.
We have over 500 cameras today, we're not pushing 600, and I'm not aware of not one that's been hacked into.
Well,
I should mention that I'm really not asking for approval for the agreement. I'm looking at Angela. We actually executed it in June, or I guess it was early July, because there's no financial fee. It's not a real estate. It's simply agreement. I work with Angela's team and Mr. Tuttle's legal folks, and it simply says, we're going to put our equipment on your rooftop, and we're not holding them liable for any damage to the equipment. And I should mention it's already signed.
Well, I certainly hope we acknowledge Mr. Tuttle's generosity for making this available to us.
If I could mention this, put a plug in for him, because he's a joy to work with. He recently purchased something called the Southeast Plaza, which is on Reynolds Park Road and Walltown Street. And working with him the last couple of weeks, he's got over 80 quality cameras already there when he purchased it. Just last week, I introduced him to folks from WSPD and the Real-Time Crime Center to get those. They love it. They said, let's get those cameras sucked into what we have. So he's a true partner with the community, and I'm looking forward to working with him in years to come.
Thank you.
Well, we gave a shout out on the last item, so why don't we give a shout out to Mr. Tuttle? You're here. Councilmember McIntosh.
I was just going to recommend that we find an opportunity to have Mr. Tuttle back so we can thank him in person.
Yeah, I really tried to get Mayor David. He had a conflict he just couldn't get out of.
Busy guy. The other thing I would note is that from a security standpoint, we're not really transmitting information like financial data or anything.
No,
that
strictly
really
video.
needs to be encrypted. This is real-time camera information that's going back
Yeah,
and forth.
it's video, ultimately directed to WSPD, but then we also archive it for follow-up investigations. And I mentioned, the parking deck type of solutions. There's ways we could use it. I'm pretty excited about the Wi-Fi too.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That Wi-Fi could help some of the digital equity issues in our community.
Agreed. Thanks for the update, Mr. Koresh.
Thank you all.
Item G3, please. Oh, before we call item G3, Mr. Mundy.
I'm sorry, I had just one more question. Did you say these are purchased or rented? Is it a rental agreement or a purchase?
It's just agreement with Mr. Tuttle.
I'm sorry, the cameras in general.
Cameras we're purchasing.
So you mentioned if we rely on one and then they go out, are we responsible for the maintenance of these, or do we have any kind of a contract agreement with the folks we purchase from?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. That item C2, the contract could cost 24. We did an RFP a year and a half ago and went out, and they were the local provider that won the bid, a local MWBE, and we have a 3-year contract with them. They literally come in and just swap it if we have one go out. But we purchase the cameras. Typically, we've been purchasing for 5 years. And we have 5 years to pay one time only, and that includes all the cloud storage and the archiving. And the contract would call 24. As one goes out, we call them, they come in. For example, IS doesn't have a bucket truck. Love to have one, but we don't have a bucket truck. So yes, they maintain them.
That's good, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, item G3, please.
Item G3, information on an update to the ShotSpotter software application.
Ms. Tony.
This is Captain Amy Galden.
Captain Galden, I had my head down. Please forgive me. You recognize, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Taylor and members of committee and council. Get this pulled up for you real quick. So, as many of you know, we recently ended the second year of our contract with ShotSpotter, are now entering our 3rd year, so we want to provide you an update on the statistical information associated with the second year. And this gives you just an estimate. This is based on several online resources, Giffords Law Center, and other online resources that researchers across the country use to estimate the cost of gun violence. So this is just a generalization. And I will point out, we're not at 39 homicides. This was just a typo in that, but last year we had 33, and currently, unfortunately, with this weekend's events, we're at 36 for this year. So this is just an estimate in general. So with 33, it's roughly $26 million related to the cost of gun violence, and with 36, you're looking at average around $28, $29 million, just to put it in a ballpark figure for you. And also, as Dr. Gay mentioned earlier, the impact of gun violence across our community. We use this data with ShotSpotter also to partner with Dr. Avery. So when we initially went live with ShotSpotter in 2021, we formed a partnership with him to provide the publicly available data from ShotSpotter. So we're using it as a holistic approach to look at other programs and avenues and projects through our community that allow us to use the data in a positive manner and for other programs. As you can see in this right here in 2023 year to date through July 31st of this year, we had 890 ShotSpotter alerts. And in 2022, there's 1,447. So with 5 months left, I anticipate us increasing that from last year. And this is just a way to show you guys the number of gun activity by month. So as you can see, in this graph here, we're looking at the number of rounds fired. July of 2023 was our highest as compared to April. And then in terms of the alerts, April of this year as well as April of 2022 were also the most significant or highest months that we had those alerts. And another way to look at the data that we use is data to look at to determine the best use of our resources and where we're deploying resources and other projects is the alerts by time of day. So this shows you here that if you look at days, Saturday and Sunday are typically the most significant days, as well as the time frame between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. So that just gives you an indication as to how many of alerts per hour. And note that it is in military time, so it's a 24-hour, whereas 0 is midnight and 23 is 11 p.m.
Captain?
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio.
What do the colors signify?
That's just to make it easier to see. So it's just based on the number. There's no direct correlation to anything other than just to make the stand out for you, is the way ShotSpotter created that graph. Also, in terms of system performance, you're looking at the number of impulses that the acoustic sensors actually detected, as well over 24,000. Now, within 60 seconds, it goes to their incident review center and then is published to us as a customer of ShotSpotter or Sound Thinking, and that is at 1,500 or 1,505 alerts. And then of those that were accurately published was 1,492. So there, like we had talked about in previous presentations regarding this, as most technology, nothing's perfect. So there were a few incidents that there were some glitches in, and I'll explain that in a second. So as you can see here, the detection rate overall with the program is 99.1%, and 3 missed incidents, 1 mislocated event, and the 13, here's the difference I was talking about in the previous slide, 13 misclassified. Whether it was alerts that were published as gunfire and ultimately determined not to be gunfire, or not published to the customer as gunfire and determined that there was an incident of gunfire. So there's a small margin of error there, but overall it did very well. And I also want to take a moment to show you a video that Lieutenant Jones, our Real-Time Crime Center, and our very own city marketing team had created to showcase an incident. It is actually a depiction of a real incident, but generalized, so we could show it publicly, just to show you how the system of ShotSpotter and the layered technology approach has been advantageous for us.
A man is shot while driving away from a parking lot. Because this incident is still undergoing trial, we can't release a motive or any specific details. But police do say they were able to solve the crime in 20 minutes, using different technologies from getting the first phone call to making the arrest.
461 is direct on the ShotSpotter alert.
At 1 p.m., the ShotSpotter alert enters the real-time crime center and communications.
1811, 1812, 1063.
Communications then dispatches the officers.
We have 6 rounds detected coming in from 2202 North Patterson Avenue. Both units, be advised, we're starting to receive calls on upgrading this to a Code 1 shooting.
At 1:03, when officers arrive to the scene, they find a victim who had been shot multiple times and is in critical condition. 2 minutes later, as witnesses at the scene are describing the suspects, that information is being relayed instantly over the radio to the detective in the RTCC.
461 is direct on the ShotSpotter.
At 1:10, the detective looks through live cameras in the area and tracks down the suspects who match the description and are running through the neighborhood. Through Fusus, the detective is watching the cameras and tracks them to a home. By 1:15, the detective informs the gang unit and violent firearms investigation team so they know where the house is located. He then creates a map from the crime scene to the front door. And 5 minutes later, the RTCC unit and detective tap into the officer's body cams live. They can see the VFIT and gang unit arrive to the house and find the suspects. They are arrested and taken into custody. If it wasn't for these pieces of technology, crimes like this that previously took days, months, years to solve or have never been solved are now coming to a close 20 minutes after the first shots were fired.
Thanks for the visual, Captain.
You're welcome. We just wanted to give you guys an example of where this technology comes into play in our investigations and how it is advantageous for us to use. And so hopefully that was a good example that you...
It's great. Any questions? Councilmember Scipio.
I just would like to make a suggestion. I love the video.
Yes, ma'am.
However, I can see and I can hear. If you would ask marketing to take into consideration people who can't hear or see. Some of it was reading at the beginning and at the end. So the real points of the video would have been missed for someone who couldn't see. So if you would ask them to consider the disabilities of a lot of our people, particularly our older community, also needs to be able to hear and see that and get the information.
Yes, ma'am. We'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And Captain, I hate that we even have to use ShotSpotter, but I'm glad it's a tool that we have in our tool belt to be more efficient and effective with dealing with these types of situations. So thank you and the brave women and men from our Winston-Salem Police Department and everybody who works in tandem with them. Thank you all for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Larson.
I was curious about in your triangle where it says impulse detected and located by acoustical sensors, 24,000. There's incidents and alerts published to the customer, 1,505. What does that 24,000 number actually mean?
So that could just be any kind of sounds, or it could be any kind of like a car backfiring, things like that, that could be detected, but then the Incident Review Center at ShotSpotter then determined that it ultimately was not gunfire, so it did not publish that alert to law enforcement.
So it picks up the noise, and then you had a method of determining whether that was a gunshot or a firecracker going off.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. And so that's why you ended up with 1,500 actually being treated as gunshots.
Correct, yes.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very, very good.
Thank you again, Captain.
Yes, and just one mention, we also wanted just to remind you that ShotSpotter has changed the name to Sound Thinking, so if you saw that in the slides, Sound Thinking has been rebranded as the new name of ShotSpotter.
Duly noted. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Item G5, please. G4, forgive me.
Item G4, information on pedicab rickshaw devices in the city of Winston-Salem.
All right, Mr. Fansler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee and council. Jeff Fansler, the Director of Transportation. So if it's okay in the pleasure of the chair, I didn't include slides in your presentation, but I think it would help my presentation just to have 4 or 5 slides on the screen. Can I share those if that's okay?
Please do.
Thank you. All right, so back out of this. Close this one. Close that one and grab mine. Here we go. And I'm hopeful that you can see it as can I.
Yes.
Very good. So what is a pedicab? And so this information item is to discuss interest in our community for this type of transportation service. So what is it? Pedicab is a pedal-powered public passenger device, as noted there, and you kind of see the image there with the passenger device on the back of usually a bicycle, some type of human-powered pedal device, typically a bicycle. And it is a vehicle for hire, and it is constructed in such manner to where folks can use it as a vehicle for hire transportation means. And they are equipped with headlights and brake lights. They are typically used after hours, like in the evening hours where that would be needed. Let's talk about why Winston-Salem needs an ordinance. So one, it allows for safe operation and enforcement, kind of regulating how and where. Provides safe, and I mentioned that where, provides those safe loading and unloading zones so we understand where folks are entering and exiting these vehicles. It does introduce a new economic opportunity for the downtown area. Because I mentioned it was a vehicle for hire. This is an opportunity for folks that are choosing this type of transportation and then paying for that service. Of course, pedicabs do allow patrons to utilize alternative methods of transportation and to have that experience downtown. And then we also wanted to mention that there are other municipalities that we benchmark in our review to understand how these are handled kind of in our state. And we looked at Greensboro and Charlotte to get a kind of better, understanding of how this is handled statewide. A little bit about ordinance overview, and this today is an information item, just to expose what we're doing and what it's about to be brought back forth. But some of the things, as I mentioned, it's important to know the ins and outs of how these folks are operating. And we did try to model it after some existing policies, our current vehicle for hire and trolley pub ordinances, which are already in city ordinance, and use that as some benchmarking and kind of how we are planning to structure this. Some of the key ordinance requirements there, as we work with our attorney's office to refine some of this, we'll note as we bring this back forward to action, you'll have a chance to see that full ordinance once we kind of get through those details. But as to some of the key ordinance requirements are designated routes and street operations, so understanding where they're going to be operating and what type of operation they're going to be doing. The equipment requirements, I mentioned headlights, taillights, how their equipment's maintained, type of logos and how they're affixed to the pedicabs, et cetera. Those type of requirements for their equipment. Of course, their driver's license, their ability to operate on city streets, public access. And then, of course, we'll have to have some language about when they're operating and how they're interacting with traffic and how they're, of course, abiding by traffic laws, et cetera. All that's noted in the ordinance. Additionally, we'll have an element of inspection and fees, how we plan to govern and regulate that from a finance and a regulatory, really inspecting that. And the inspection will take place similar to how we do vehicle for hire inspections through the Winston-Salem Department of Transportation. And then another element we want to mention that there will be some insurance requirements as well operating on our public rights of way. So that'll be another element of the ordinance that we'll be bringing back forward when we do that next month. Wanted to talk briefly about what staff is recommending as the routes. So there are 4 primary routes highlighting some major attractions downtown. Notice they're primarily isolated Trade Street, 5th, 4th, up around a couple loops around Liberty Street. But wanted to just note that the idea here is to document where these folks should be, to one, be able to more efficiently monitor and enforce, but two, have a vetting of staff for safe loading, egress, and so have that internal kind of quality control where we can understand where folks are entering and exiting, a little bit where we would endorse or in other words, have a better understanding of what's a safe environment for them to be entering and exiting these vehicles. So let's talk a little bit about next steps. I mentioned this is information item, of course. We will be bringing this back, but it will require some little bit ordinance, refining that with our attorney's office. We're working closely with them to get the ordinance right, to benchmark other cities, and to make sure we're rolling this out where we can feel confident in our mechanisms to, one, enforce and maintain that enforcement. I mentioned that because I think that's the critical path, is to understand how we plan to enforce this moving forward. We'll be looking to likely partner with our folks on the Downtown Bike Patrol and others to make sure that we're coordinating that enforcement plan, but those details we're trying to refine as we move forward. We are looking to bring this back for action in October. We do have interest currently to operate pedicabs in Winston-Salem, which is exciting, so we want to respect that and then get our work done on the front end so we can bring an action item back to adopt this policy in October is our plan. And then, of course, we install signs there because at the stops, we will be designating those with signage so that you know if you're a patron that you where to be and what route you're on, so that way when your ride comes, that they know where to stop and where you can get on and get off. And then, as I mentioned, future requests for additional stops, different routes, or maybe additional companies. We wanted to create this where it would have to be brought back through this body or, and then ultimately vetted at the committee and city council level and rolling this back out to be added to our system. So we'll have another chance as our system grows, maybe there's interest in this. We will document that formally through the committee, bringing it back forward. So that's what we have today. I'm happy to answer any questions. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fansler. Members of the council, this item has been properly presented, and as well as the next steps. Any questions or comments? Mr. Mundy, then Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you. I understand definitely the need for regulating what's happening, particularly downtown where we've got lots of folks. But a couple of questions for follow-up. I want to make sure that we don't over-regulate anything to the point that we're not an inviting market to these types of transport. Like when we look at fees, I'm sure that the fee structure for a cab would not be the same as this because the income that they generate is very different. So I just want to make sure that as you're looking at this, that we balance out maintaining some type of control and making sure that we're not overtaxing the business folks who are coming in. This can't be a big money maker. It just can't be. So, they're doing us a favor largely by coming in and operating here.
Thank you, Councilmember Mundy. And I think when we bring this back, you'll see, I think the inspection fees and the annual dues essentially are affordable, and we'll have that discussion once you can see that policy. So it is in there, and we're happy to have that discussion.
Explain to me the routes, because when I'm thinking like a tour bus, if I get on at 1, I follow that route. Mm-hmm. And is that what this is telling me, or that these are only the streets so I could? Typically, the person who's paying the pedicab tells the pedicab where they want to go.
Sure.
So what if I pick it up at Silver Moon Saloon and where I want to go isn't on Route 1?
And I think that's part of what we're trying to regulate a little bit is to understand, from an enforcement perspective, it's not just everything's a one-off where you're just going here, but to have these designated stops where we can police when they're going to be there, where they're supposed to be, and then making sure that they have a vetted stop for safety. So it's not just pick up and, hey, I want to go here. Maybe that's an unsafe location to get on and get off. But it's more of an attempt to, one, have an ability to enforce because we know the routes, we know the stops, and if they deviate from that, it'll be a little bit easier for us to enforce. Should that not be the pleasure of this, I think that, of course, we can bring that back and when we roll this out. If that's something that this body wants to have that maybe revision and we can see, I'm happy to bring that back as a recommendation. But right now, this is a tool to be able to more efficiently enforce.
Councilman McIntosh.
I want to agree with Councilmember Mundy on this. I think the least amount of regulation we can do is preferred, and I'm sure it'll be an evolving sort of process. And I would imagine that the downtown partnership representing the merchants and the potential operators will have some say in this. So I think over time, these routes might change. As Main Street goes two-way, and we get businesses over there. So they'll shift and they'll change, but I'm sure that's part of the plan.
Point well taken, and we did notice, and we're benchmarking these other cities. Some are more restrictive, some are less, and so I'm happy to bring that back as maybe which is the best fit, and we can have that discussion.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Councilman, we'll recognize Councilman Larson, and then we'll recognize you for a second, Councilman.
Trying to understand the zone of operation here. Are we creating a zone in which these things will operate, or are we treating these things like taxi cabs that would allow them to go off track, as it were? I mean, I'm a little curious about putting them on a specific route, like a bus, rather than like a taxi, and they really function more as a taxi cab, would they?
The intent of what's shown on the screen there are routes. So they are not to designate the zone where you can kind of have free reign in that zone and stop. For the reasons that have been aforementioned, I think what I'm hearing from this discussion, it sounds like we need to go back and have a discussion and a review of how we plan to roll this out. Because, as I mentioned, this is an attempt to designate where we are going to have these and better regulate that so we can have a grasp on that. But we'll benchmark some other cities, and we can bring that back to have that more candid discussion.
Yeah, I think I would like to see a zone in which they can operate, but I know they give them flexibility within that zone to go off track, as it were, to go to side roads or whatever within the zone itself, to function more or less like a taxi cab would within a limited area of operation. That's sort of what I would think might work best for them as well as for us, for the customer.
Councilmember Larson, that's noted, and we'll do we can bring that back.
Councilman Mundy.
Does the same thing apply to Uber? Does Uber have designated stops? And why would this be any more or less dangerous than an Uber or a taxi?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons, right? This is pedal powered, and they're got a little bit smaller footprint. But really the issue here, I think, is you have the passengers exposed much differently than you would in a vehicle, and I think that's part of the risk. To your point, rolling this out, we really want to have the concentration of where they're going to be. And it sounds like if there's an interest to have that flexibility where it's not a designated route, we need to bring some of that benchmark data back and make those policy decisions a little bit more refined.
Even if these are the streets you can travel on,
Sure.
but any street that's in the zone. And then the last thing I wanted to ask is if you're involving Visit Winston-Salem in this, because this could be a real boon for outside groups coming in. I don't see a stop at the convention center, for instance.
That's right.
Well, there aren't stops on here, they're just routes, right?
Excuse me, Councilmember McIntosh. I'm going to come right back to you. Councilmember Scipio.
Yeah, I think we need to look a little more about, I don't know why, this just looks like a brewery stop to me. That's what it looks like to me, that it's focused just on downtown and drinkers. That may be the goal or the intent of whoever brought that to the table. There may be a need, but I think we need to be a little broader in the vision. It's just a very cute concept that could have appeal in other places beyond just the brewery stops. So I think that does need some investigation. And was trying to figure out, are seat belts required on these cabs?
They are.
These little, I couldn't remember whether
That's part of that equipment inspection that they are required.
Councilman McIntosh.
There are stops on here.
Forgive me, I had to do it.
I'm good.
All right. Anything else? Any other questions or concerns for Mr. Fansler? All right. Oh, Councilman Burke.
Thank you. When you come back with additional research, I think that since we're talking about using Greensboro and Charlotte as benchmark locations, I would love to see the difference in width with the streets that their pedicabs travel versus the width of our streets. Our streets are already narrow in downtown Winston-Salem and very difficult for cars to maneuver back and forth. And to add pedicabs, I'm just wondering what kind of impact that might have on cars traveling downtown Winston-Salem. Thank you.
Councilman Burke, we're going to let you have the last word. Mr. Fansler, thank you for the presentation. We look forward to seeing this item when it comes back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members of the council and committee, that both completes our consent and general agenda items. Is there any further business that should be brought forth to be considered for the good of the order? Seeing nothing further, we'll consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you.